Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to have a look at how to create this very loading animation using the Webflow interactions by GSAP. And now this demo actually was because Webflow invited me to come to New York City a couple of weeks ago for a Webflow conference, which was amazing because I had the opportunity to give a live demonstration of creating this on stage. But I only had about 15 minutes, which wasn't enough really to show all of the things that go into making such an animation, fine-tuning the easings and just some more details in general. So that really felt like a speed build. And I figured I'd make a proper YouTube video with a bit of a more normal educational pace where you guys can follow along and learn as to how I would go about creating, again, this very animation here using some staggered text, having a look at this 3D animation going on over here, and just some tips that I've got for you guys. This is available as a free clone, and there is going to be a link down in the description. So if you want, go and check it out. Maybe you want to watch the video first, maybe you're going to clone it, delete the interactions and follow along from scratch. Really whatever suits for you. And before we get into it, my name is Ilya Vanek. If you're new here, I am the co-founder of Osmo Supply, which is a dev toolkit that I'm building with a good friend of mine. We have more than 100 resources, both for Webflow users and non-Webflow users. Also, a link will be in the description to talk about that. But today we're diving into Webflow interactions, so I want to get into this with you guys. I have the clone myself, and I have removed the timeline interactions. So if we're heading over to the interactions tab, after you've cloned it, there would be a page load animation here. For me, there isn't, because I want to do this from scratch. But before we dive into animating, I want to have a quick look at the anatomy of the page just to see, so we're all on the same page, how this is built. So we have a nav element over here fixed on top of the page. And then inside my main element, I have a section. And in that section is a bunch of elements, mainly the main page content, which has, the tag and the heading, button row. And then here on the bottom, there is this little reel element with some absolute position circles in the background. And then we have my background element. And this one especially might be the one you, I think, might find interesting to dive into how this is created. There is an absolute position div all along the back called Home Hero BG with a flex position of center. And inside is a list. And this list is basically just a wrapper that has all these circle divs inside of it. All these Hero BG items. So this list itself also has everything flex centered. Its width decides how large these circles are. And it has a position of relative and then some 3D transforms going on here. So if we were to quickly toggle these off, you will see that basically the list is centered in screen. But by applying these 3D transforms, so both a negative X movement and a positive Y movement, as well as some rotations, we get this interesting look. And to create this depth effect, every single item here has a transform on the Z-axis. So it's, transforming in the depth of it. To create this, I have given 15 combo classes. Usually for my normal client projects, if I would have to achieve something like this, I would do it with custom CSS, probably do an index-based calculation. But for the sake of keeping everything very simple and very Webflow native, I've gone with the combo class situation over here. So we have item is1 up until is15. Now, the reason I wanted to dive into that is because we'll be animating these 3D properties. So I figured it might be good for everyone to understand where they're coming from and how this layout is achieved. Now, I think we're good to dive into the interaction panel. So we'll head over to create a new interaction, create a page load animation, and we have this cool timeline opening up. Now in total, I believe there is about 13 actions that we're going to add. Some actions are going to manipulate the same element, some are not, but I'll take you step by step. And I'll show you guys how to use the color options in the timeline to sort of get a visual overview of how you can use them to organize your actions on a timeline. First things first that I like to do is to get a clean canvas. Right now, this page is extremely full. All elements are visible. So if I would start my timeline animation, start to finish, and start animating my hero now, the heading, sorry, I would still have all these elements in view and I wouldn't really get a proper view of how my animation is starting to feel. So what I like to do is sort of work back to front, so get some things out of the way. So we saw, for example, that my nav element is going to fade in at some point. So I can just add that action already and then just throw it out. So the way we'll do that is by selecting the element that we want to animate. I'm going to go for this nav inner element and create an action, custom, and we'll call it reveal nav. Now it has already selected the class of nav inner as its target because I had this element selected when I clicked to add the action. If it doesn't, just make sure that you have this element over here selected. I think I'm going to animate it over a duration of 1 second, maybe with a very dramatic expo out. And I want to animate it from, there's no need to add it to, from a Y position and 0% opacity and maybe 200%, just so it really goes out of screen and then we'll fade in. So if we check that out, I have that element coming in. I'm going to zoom out a bit to give myself some overview. And what I mean by creating some breathing room in my timeline is now if I add this tween like all the way to the front, we see that for a couple seconds, there's nothing now, which is going to be sort of my working canvas, if you will. Like that's what I like to use. So these circles, they're also supposed to fade in from the bottom. So we can add another action by selecting the circles first and then click action, custom, and let's call it reveal bottom circles. We'll also do a duration of 1. We can just set the start item similar to that other item there and also select the expo out. Again, we'll do a from tween and this time a scale of 0. And maybe we can stagger them for maybe 0.1 seconds. Staggering is always a bit of, trial and error. And then, yeah, we can start maybe from the last one, so the most inner one. So now if I put my playhead over here and just check how that feels, we kind of get this cool overlapping scaling circle thing going on. And that's another element out of my view, working my way back to front. Now, a wonderful thing that has been added to the new whole interaction panel is the ability to select your target settings. Now, both of these things are targeted by class, but we can also use custom attributes. Now I have some other element. So for example, this button row, the tag, and this real block over here that I want to fade in. Now, I don't want to be adding actions for every single element if they're just going to have the very same animation applied to them. So if I exit out of the interaction panel real quick, and with this button row selected, or actually with the tag, I see that I have the data load reveal attribute to this thing. And it wasn't the button row, but actually the individual buttons. Both of them have data load reveal, as well as this home hero reel wrap. You see all of them share the same attribute, so we can add a single action and then just target all these things. So if we head back into interactions, open up the page loader, and then maybe with this reel or basically any element selected, because we're going to change it anyway, I'm going to select new action, custom again, and then say reveal, let's call it content. And now we're going to open up the target settings, and instead of class, we're going to say attribute. And we can do data, load, reveal. I'm going to click it, and that's it. Make sure that it's scoped to all matching elements. I'm going to add it to the same place. I could, select the duration like this, or just type it, because otherwise you get these funny decimals, and my OCD cannot handle that. So I'm going to select expo out again. Maybe these ones can actually be a bit faster because we want to stagger them. And then I could again choose offset of 0.1, or if you want, you can choose total time. And what that just does is that it takes your total stagger time of maybe 0.5 seconds, and then it will just evenly distribute all these items across those 0.5 seconds, if that makes sense. So if we, actually have to add the animated properties. So we will remove actually I needed the opacity. So toggle that back on from 0% and maybe from, I don't know, 3 EMs down. So if we check that out now, I have those elements coming in. My time had moved a bit. And we see how these elements reveal. Cool. Now, that is almost it. Let's see, yeah, the final step to get a clean working canvas would be to animate this paragraph here. So I'm going to click it. Again, click the plus, go for custom, and let's actually say reveal paragraph. For this one, I could leave it on class, but now this element has a class of p-l, or my abbreviation for paragraph large. And maybe in the future, some designer goes into your project and changes it to be a p.regular, adds a different class, and your animation breaks. Very annoying, because you have to head back into the timeline, change the target. So again, here, attributes can also be very valuable and just very helpful and just save you a bit of headache in the future. Because if you just scope this one to the attribute, no matter the class that's going to be in this paragraph, your animation will continue to work. So I've added that data load text to this paragraph thing. So if we open that up and select attribute again, I did copy it, nice. And I can click data load text. And then maybe also a duration of 0.1, a nice dramatic easing. And I want to use the split text function that's now built in to just have these two lines come in one by one. I again remove the opacity, but actually need that one. From 0%, maybe from pretty far down, 125%, and then to accentuate that these lines are split, otherwise it makes no sense, we're going to add a 0.1 delay between each line. So now if we check that out, we have all my content coming in nicely. Now, I talked about color coding briefly earlier, and it's going to make more sense when all tweens are in, but just because these are sort of my final group of things that I want to animate, I tend to just give these the same color because I animate them once and I don't need them anywhere else in my timeline. So I just sort of group them together. And you see that I can just, hold and drag and group things like this. It's a very intuitive workflow. And I have all my things gathered here. Almost ready to continue. I'd say now, especially the main thing is to have these circles in my center position because they seem a bit strange now and I want to have them come in from the very middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the list item, since that's the one that we saw had all the 3D transformations going on. And I'm going to click with the list selected to add a new action and say custom. I'll just call this like list position for now. We can leave this to be on the class because unlike paragraph or heading text, this one is very less likely to be changed in terms of class. So my list position, and then I want to make a from tween of this. And let me think, we have a move on the X and Y. We don't have a scale, but we do have a rotate on X and Y, I believe. My moves were animated with VW. And then my rotates are just in degrees. Yeah, there we go. Now we see that I've reset my list position. So later on, when that's going to move back, this is the tween that will power that. I'm not going to change the duration or easing of that now, because that's really a thing that I would treat more in the sequence that I'm going to build in a more logical sense. But to at least have it in its right center position, I like this. And actually, I need to animate the scale as well, because I want my circle to be much smaller when the page loads. So I'm going to add a new action, call it custom. And we can call this list scale, or maybe just so it's more clear in the timeline, we'll call this circle scale. And this one is actually going to be one of the very first things. So I can drag it up and left. And over here, I want to animate this from, let's remove all these other properties, from a scale of 0 to a scale of 0.4. And we see that that's sort of going to be the scale involved here when we're going to animate the heading. I'm going to move this out of the way again. I'm going to add a new action. I can also do so by clicking the right mouse and add action here. And it's just going to add it on like the horizontal position on the timeline. And then if you want, you can drag it up to match it with your position. Or if it's down here, you can just right click anywhere on the timeline and select order actions by start time. So that's going to have like the nice waterfall as you're going to work on later. Because that's the kind of annoying in my workflow here. You saw that I've added these things all the way to the right to create some white space. But by then adding new actions, it's going to add them all the way on the right here instead of on my start. That's kind of a trade-off, but I prefer my white space. Now we have created this empty animation by clicking right, and we're going to use this one to animate my heading. So I'm going to do this way at the beginning here, and this is going to be the part that's going to animate sort of the first intro. We saw that the first step actually is the first words coming in a staggered way. Not even separating them yet, that's going to be another action. The first step is really to animate those headings, well, the words. And just real quickly gonna exit out of again. Similar to my paragraph, I have given my heading an attribute, just in case the class name would change in the future. This is gonna be a lot easier to target. So opening that back up, custom animation, I'm gonna say reveal heading. And instead of class, again, attribute, data load heading. I'm gonna split my text by words, and I'm gonna animate them from, not gonna remove opacity this time, from 0. And then actually I do need a to-tween because I'm thinking ahead here, but check this out. My circles are perfectly centered in the screen because of the absolute position background element, but my heading is not. That's just due to the way the flexbox is aligned. There is some paragraph below and a tag on top. So it's just not perfectly centered on screen. So we can fake that by animating instead of from, let's say 100%, maybe we're gonna add it to about 50% so that when, why is it not working? Oh, my attribute didn't, there we go. My attribute didn't function. And now we see that if we animate it to a Y position of 50%, it's about centered with the circle. Maybe you want to tweak this a little bit, put it on 45. But I'm going to leave it at 50 now, because actually I think that does look centered. So this way we can fake a centered heading real quick. And then the reveal animation is also going to be staggered, maybe with a open F5, just very subtle. You see, just to create a little bit of an interesting motion instead of just animating it by one line. Maybe make the duration a bit longer, choose a more powerful easing curve, and then we have my words coming in nicely. And actually I want to delay the circle scale until we're going to split the heading. So I'm just going to move that thing right again. And this is step 1. Now step 2 of the animation is going to be separating the two words. For this, again, we can use the new custom selectors, and we don't actually have to pre-split it in the design environment. We can actually do that with interactions. We've split the text by words here. So now if we're going to add a new action just below, and maybe towards where this animation is ending, I want to start separating these things. So this custom animation is going to be move heading left. And for this, we're going to use the custom selector. Custom selector is basically just writing CSS. And since we've split the text by words, actually I'm going to show you in the inspector, what happens under the hood is that GSAP makes divs for each element. So this is my H1 that I have in Webflow, but under the hood, it's going to be split into separate words, separate DOM elements, and these divs we can target. So in the custom CSS, we can do the data load heading, the attribute that we had before, and then by adding a space, we're going to search inside this heading for the div block, but not just any, because this selector would just animate all 4 of them, but we're going to add a pseudo selector by adding like is this a semicolon? The 2 dots basically, I don't know the correct English word, by the end of type. open and closing brackets and then adding number 1. We'll copy all of this by, Command C, do a comma, paste, and then just changing that second thing to be number 2. So now we're targeting word 1 and word 2. And we're going to animate these only on the x-axis. And I think by heart it was like 0.45 EM, I think. So now we see that I'm only animating my left words. And it's really not 0.5, but probably like 0.1. It's going to have to be a lot more. Nice. And now before we're fine-tuning that, I'm going to duplicate this action. And just to keep an oversight, I'm going to rename this one to move heading right. Open up the selector, change this to be 3 and 4. And this one obviously needs a positive X movement, and I think this one was supposed to be 0.45. So then if we add the circle scaling somewhere in here, what we're going to get is something like this. Actually, this one needs to move left a whole lot more, minus 1.5. That looks about right. There we go. So now, actually, maybe we can incorporate it. No, it does need a little delay. See, this is nice about the timeline, right? You don't have to worry about the exact timings yet. You can just move the things around as you like it. And then maybe we do add a longer duration and then just add a bit more of a dramatic ease so that if we play this, we see how that moves out. Nice. Almost complete. Just a couple more actions, because after animating this, we're going to sort of fake a little bouncy wave thing, just so it becomes a bit more playful. Now for that, we have to target the actual circle elements. So inside my list, there's all these hero BG item things going on. And I want to like move them up and then move them down. To create like a sort of a yo-yo effect is what the native option for this in GSAP is called. And we don't yet have that available in the timeline. So we're going to fake it by adding one action to move them up and then a second action to move them back down. So let's start by creating this. We're going to add a new action, custom, and we're going to say move circles up. It can be as simple as that. And then in my target, just make sure that we're not only targeting the is 15th, but just every hero BG item. And what we're going to do is only a movement on the y-axis of, I think by heart, that was going to be minus 30 VW. And now I actually want this thing to be over here. So that's going to happen somewhere over here. Now we see all my circles moving up, but I kind of want to do this in a staggered way to accentuate that sort of wave effect. And I'm going to make this a whole lot longer, or maybe 0.75. And then we're going to add a stagger of something really short but subtle, like 0.03. And then even though visually that first circle might seem to start, it's actually the one furthest back. So to make sure that we start with the first one, we're going to select end here. So now if we're going to animate this, we see that we sort of have that short delay. And instead of power 1 out, which seems kind of straight now, a bit boring, I can select a power 4.in, because this is going to be the step 1 of the action, of the wave. So if we do animate this one in, we can animate the next one out. And so those two together are sort of like an in-out tween. So now we see all these circles animating up. And then my list position already comes in, but that's a bit too soon. So again, move that out of the way. We can duplicate this action and call this move circles down. I'm just going to animate these back to 0. Maybe now we can do like a bit more of a dramatic stagger. And then a thing that you can use is the visualization of when the actual tween duration or the animation duration, which is 0.75, when this thing ends is when the first element is ready. The whole stagger box that you see here is the time it takes for all the other elements to finish. So if we put that move circles down, at the exact moment the staggering of the other is ending, we sort of have this immediate thing of moving element up and down. Might just be best to show you guys. And then we have these. Oh, wait, I was kind of confused as to why it was visually not happening, but that is because this move circles down still has the power4.in animation. So the animation is taking really long to get started. So if we switch that to power4.out, now we see the second that first circle hits the top, it immediately starts moving down and you get this cool wave effect. Whereas if we would add it to the end of this animation, we're going to have something that doesn't really feel natural, because you see that it's waiting for everything to go up and then everything to go down. So if we do it like this, it feels a bit more fluid. You see? And then we have that wave. And then we can combine the list position with animating these things back down, maybe over a very long duration. So now if we add this, we see my composition coming together. Now, final thing, no, actually second to last, we have to scale the circles back up, because remember over here, we set their scale to animate from 0 to 0.4. So we can actually duplicate this action and maybe add it somewhere over here. And actually this one can be quite long as well. And we can call this scale circle final size and just animate it from 0.4 to 1. So that now when we preview this interaction, you see that while it's moving in position, we have these circles going to their final size. And just as this is happening, I would like to animate my heading back into position as well. So we can duplicate this action just to work a bit quicker, move it down here. And maybe as the circle final size is also going on, move heading back. And we can change our custom selector to remove everything up until data load heading and then all divs inside. And we can animate these to a 0x movement. And then remember that we also have them set to a 50% on the y-axis. We're going to animate that back to 0 as well. So that now when everything is going to start playing, I'm just going to make sure that this is sort of semi here. I think my timeline is complete. There we go. So that was about it. It's quite a long video already. So if you've made it this far, I guess you found it interesting to listen to me for this long. Again, there is going to be a clonable down in the description. And if you feel like checking out Osmo supply, there's going to be a link as well. We don't use any Webflow interactions, but we do everything with custom GSAP still, because it tends to be a bit more advanced stuff. But maybe that interests you. So in that case, again, links down below. And if you watched it this far, thank you so much. And I hope to see you in the next video.